Welcome to How to Troubleshoot Career Section Single Sign-On Issues with TCC. Today, what we're going to cover is what elements on a candidate's profile actually grant single sign-on access to your internal employees, how to identify those issues on the candidate profile, and then we're also going to learn how to export the data using TCC and eventually also update that data using TCC. So let's get right to it. So you may have encountered some issues with your employees getting access to your internal career section. And it works a little bit different than your employees accessing SmartOrg or your hiring managers accessing the back end of the recruiting module. With the internal career sections, there's a couple of elements that are required to have in place for those employees to be able to have single sign-on access. So first of all, your career section has to be enabled for single sign-on. In most cases, your career section is limited to employees or candidate records that are internal, which means that they have been flagged as internal employees. They've got the house icon on the front end, and they have a profile that's created in the career section, or they have a candidate profile. Now, this is what gives them the permission to be able to access that career section. The second thing that we need to have in place is a way for those candidates, but not only on the Taleo side, but also between your identity management to be able to sync up or at least authorize that these folks are allowed or have authentication between your system, granting them access to the career section. So in the user side of things, so if it's a hiring manager or recruiter, all that is required is to have the username match up with the element that you're using to authenticate from your identity provider. So if you've set up the email address to be the identifying element, that you need to have the username be the email address. Or if you had the employee ID set up, or if there's another username that you use internally, maybe through ADFS, that element then needs to be on the username record. For candidates, it's a little bit different. So I've got a projection here in TCC already up so that we can go through some of the elements that are required here. And the important ones to keep in mind are internal application. And that, again, is the element or field that would denote if they are an internal candidate. So that's the house icon that you see in the front end. But you'll note under credentials, we actually have two different fields. We have the credentials username and we have credentials SSOID. So instead of the username as you would find on the user side of Taleo, on the internal career section side, SSOID is specifically used to enable single sign-on access, and it's not using the username. Now, the trouble starts is that you can't actually see the username in the front end when you're going into see a candidate's profile as a recruiter or a hiring manager. When you go in, you are able to see, of course, all their other information, employee number, their number, first and last name. You're able to see their username. You're able to see the email address, and you're even able to see visually whether or not they're internal or not. But you're not able to see the SSO ID. So the SSOID is certainly a field that, while it enables a lot behind the scenes, you want single sign-on to feel magical. The only way to view and validate the SSOID is by exporting it with TCC. So what you'll want to do is set up a export. And here I've already created a candidate export. I have pulled in the employee number. I have pulled in the candidate number, the first name, last name, in addition to the single sign-on ID, the username, email address, and the internal application flag. This will allow me to look at the entire record and make sure that everything is in place for that candidate record to be able to have single sign-on. So what I've done is we're going to look at a test candidate. In this case, this candidate, the username is their employee ID. And the employee ID is 015998. So what I'm going to do is pull out specifically that record with the username of 015998. Now, in this case, what you'll see is that they've also have that as the employee number, so I can equally use the employee number here instead as the field to look this up. One thing to keep in mind when you think about the database in Taleo, especially for candidates, username is unique, whereas employee number is not a unique constraint. So more than one record could potentially have the same employee number, but not more than one candidate cannot have the same username. And it's the same with SSOID and email address if you've turned on email uniqueness for your zone. So let's go ahead and run this export. You, of course, need to have TCC set up already and connecting to your zone. So then when I hit run on this is going to export that file. And once it's exported, I will pull it up. I've got it pulled up in another screen. So when I open this up here, that should open up here in Notepad++. And as we can see, the employee number is the same as the username, but then what we see is that under their SSOID, it's actually their email address. So we don't want to have the email address because in our case, the way we've set up for this test scenario, the way we've set up single sign-on is that we're using the employee ID. And so in that case, what we want to do is we want this number here to show up under the SSOID. Again, when you're looking at these types of profiles, make sure that it applies to your scenario. The things you want to look at is internal application. Yes, in this case, this person, true. So they are an internal applicant or an internal candidate. They do have the permission to access the career section. But we know because of the way single sign-on is set up, that we want the employee ID to be the SSO ID. So how do we do that? Is there a field in the front end that we can do and edit the profile? Unfortunately, again, there's not. So we do have to use TCC to also update this field. So let me go ahead and show you how to do that now. So I've already gone ahead and set up an import script. If you don't know how to set up an import script, you can probably find some specific videos around that. But in this case, it's a really simple import script. It's going to be a candidate update. We are going to have the header present, and we're going to use comma delimited to set up our file. If you look at the columns here, we just have number, which is going to be the candidate number, and then we have the SSOID field that we want to create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Notepad++, and I'm going to actually copy this. We'll go ahead and actually save this as candidate SSOID update. And then all I want is I want to match these columns up. So we are not going to use the employee number. We're just going to use the number. So that will be these two. And then we want to update is to the SSOID. I actually don't like to keep the double quotes in there, but we want SSOID as our header. And then we just want this number to be left here. So we've got number, SSOID, this is the candidate number, and this is what we want the SSOID to be. I'm going to go hit save. And then we're going to go to our configuration file that I've already set up. And when we run this, I'm going to select the SSOID update file. What I like to do is just copy and paste this and then put results so that I know that I'm exporting the results into a similarly named file. So then let's go ahead and hit OK. When that completes, let's go ahead and look at these results. We can see that we have had a successful update. And let's go ahead and export that file again. So I'm going to go ahead and run this export again. Excellent. So I'm going to show the before and after. So this was what our file looked like before. Email address as the SSOID, and this is the new file here. We can see that the employee ID is now the SSOID. And with that, this candidate can now use single sign-on to access the career section. Now, in any case, you can use similar updates to update other things. And again, if you're using email address or whatever it is that you're using when you're in, that's what you want to match up to the SSO ID. If you're unsure of what value is being used, you either need to reach out to the department that handles your identity management. A lot of people will use Azure or Okta, or so whoever handles that process, the IDP, as we like to call it in SSO parlance, will tell you what is being sent there. The other alternative is to run a SAML trace in your browser when you attempt to use single sign-on, and you will be able to look at what value is being sent through that SAML trace. But that'll be a video for another time. So hopefully this was helpful in guiding you through how to troubleshoot single sign-on issues for your career section, and also updating the candidate profile to allow for single sign-on to happen smoothly. Have a great day.